What if I told you the ancient Greeks built a computer years before anything like it should have existed? Imagine a device of intricate gears and dials, capable of predicting eclipses and planetary movements with astounding accuracy. This isn't science fiction, it's the Antikythera Mechanism, and its story will blow your mind. Forget what you thought you knew about ancient technology. Buried beneath the waves for centuries, a discovery was made that rewrote history. A device so complex, so advanced, it defies our understanding of ancient ingenuity. We're talking about a calculator that could predict astronomical events, crafted by a civilization that vanished long ago. Prepare to have your mind stretched as we journey back in time to decode one of history's greatest technological mysteries. How did ancient Greeks craft a machine capable of tracking the cosmos with such precision? Join us as we uncover the secrets of the Antikythera Mechanism, an astronomical computer that reveals the incredible sophistication of a civilization, often underestimated. Here is the question this story demands we answer. Who built this impossible machine? How did it work? And why did the knowledge behind it disappear, only to resurface 2 millennia later? It begins with a storm. The year is off the rocky island of Antikythera. Sponge divers descend into green-blue silence, their lead-weighted boots thudding onto a seafloor littered with amphorae. One diver rises back to the surface wild-eyed, swearing he has seen a graveyard of statues. Bronze limbs. Marble faces gazing up through the water as if trying to breathe again. The Hellenic authorities rush in, and with them the promise of treasure. Bronzes, vases, jewelry. But among the glittering relics, the fragile core of a secret lies hidden. An ugly, corroded lump of bronze and wood, fused into what looks like rock. It is pulled from the deep, tagged, and taken to Athens. It sits in a museum case, outshone by gods and heroes. No one knows what it is. No one is looking. Years pass, then an accident of curiosity. A scholar peers closer and notices something no one expects in the world of antiquity. Teeth. Not the teeth of an animal, but the crisp, repeating bites of a gear. Imagine the jolt that runs through him. This isn't a statue fragment, this is machinery. Inside the rock, clockwork. Civilization holds its breath. What lay discarded as a barnacled curiosity becomes the opening move in a story that challenges everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. We almost lost it to neglect. We almost never asked the right question. But once asked, what is it? The answer refuses to be simple. The fragments are brittle, green with corrosion, cut by time into batsur hunks. Some no larger than a coin. In one, a large bronze gear lies frozen mid-spin. In another, a sliver of a dial, etched with Greek letters so tiny they look like whispers from a vanished hand. The wood has mostly dissolved. What remains is a skeleton of thought. Gears, scales, axles, every piece a syllable in a language of metal. And that is where the unsealing begins. X-minus rays, photographs, a patient, almost devotional process of looking. Layer by layer, the mechanism opens itself to us, like a locked box finally giving up its hinges. Picture it whole, a case of wood, the size of a shoebox. The glow of polished bronze within. On the front, 2 concentric rings, one for the calendar, one for the zodiac, charged with names of months and constellations. Needles sweep these rings like the hands of a clock. Except this clock doesn't tell you lunch. It tells you the sky. It tracks the sun's slow crawl across the ecliptic. It shows the moon's position and the silver peel of its phases with a little sphere half black, with a little sphere half white, waxing, waning, breathing with the night. Turn a crank on the side and the machine comes alive. Gears bite, wheels whisper. The heavens begin to move on your table. Now watch the back. 2 spirals etched into bronze like coiled serpents. The upper, a 19-year track called the Metonic cycle, were lunar months, weaving the dance of lunar time into solar years. There is a smaller window where every 4th circuit marks a Callippic cycle of 76 years. Tia, a grander correction for the slow slippage of time. Below, another spiral. Lunar months, the Saros cycle. This is prophecy in metal. Set the mechanism to a date, and the pointer on the Saros dial tells you when the sun and moon will align with the earth to darken the sky. Eclipses, not magic, mechanics, and yet it feels like magic. There is even a third register that rolls these predictions into a greater rhythm of 54 years. The exeligmos, neatly correcting for the small discrepancies that accumulate as months pile up. Keeping the eclipse omens in step with reality, imagine a priest or a scholar turning that crank, watching an eclipse emerge from bronze, then moving to the games dial, a small window on the dot back that lists the cycle of the great Pan-Hellenic contests, including the Olympiad. Not simply a watch of the sky, but a keeper of human time. Festivals, planting, sailing seasons, harvests. In this world, the gods are written in the stars, yes, but so are taxes, treaties, and tracts. The Greeks were not passive under the heavens, they negotiated with them. This device gave them leverage, and we call it an analog computer because, like our computers, it models reality with machinery. Dozens of interlocking gears translate a turn of the hand into movements across dials that mimic celestial motion. But to understand how it works is to peer into the Greek soul. They named the universe cosmos, order, ornament, the idea that beneath the chaos of weather and war lay a set of patterns, knowable, beautiful, philosophy in Athens, mathematics in Alexandria, observatories under the soft skies of Rhodes. The Antikythera Mechanism is a sculpture of that idea, a clockwork universe you can hold. Who built it? The names that rise are stars in their own right. Archimedes, the wizard of Syracuse, of whom Cicero later wrote, describing a device that could reproduce the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. Hipparchus of Nicaea, who mapped the stars with ruthless precision and discovered the precession of the equinoxes, building mathematical models for the moon's erratic motion. Apollonius of Perga, who played with epicycles and deference, the gears of geometry that precede gears of bronze. Rhodes, a hub of craftsmen and astronomers, whispers its claim. Syracuse, with its tradition of war machines and wonders, makes its bid. We cannot yet sign one name to the mechanism, but we can draw the silhouette of the mind required, a thinker who loved both number and metal. As both Manian Mechor, a mathematician who was not content with ink, a technician who could translate equations into teeth, consider the craft. Look closely at a gear tooth, corroded but still proud. Each one hand-cut, triangular, filed to mesh with its neighbor so that errors do not accumulate. The axles turned in tiny bearings, the plates drilled with care. The gear trains do not simply count, they compute. In one place, a pin and slot mechanism makes the moon hurry and slow exactly as it does in the sky, a mechanical expression of Hipparchus' lunar theory. This is not just precision, it is concept. Someone looked at the moon's uneven speed and thought, I can carve that into bronze. They did it with simple tools, saws, hammers, compasses, and a fierce patience that modern machinists recognize. These are the fingerprints of a workshop at the height of Hellenistic ambition, the age that built libraries and lighthouse towers and machines that sang for kings. Yet the metal whispers more than just movement. Along the edges of fragments, 2-millimeter letters crowd like notes scribbled in a margin. Instructions, labels, explanations. If the mechanism is a body, these are the voice of its maker speaking across centuries. Reading them is an art called epigraphy, the study of inscriptions. But time has gnawed at the letters, corroding strokes into shadows, so the scholars turned, again, to physics. With powerful X-ray tomography, they peeled back the corrosion, layer by layer, like a CT scan of a fossilized thought. Wink by wink, the text reappeared. The fragmentary sentences became a user manual. Set the date here. See the eclipse predictions there. Note the color of the moon during this event. Mind the phases in this month. One word reveals a wonder, Parapegma, an ancient star calendar. The Greeks marked the risings and settings of bright stars as the seasons turned, not as superstition but as signals to plant, to sail, to celebrate. The mechanism's Parapegma tells you when Sirius returns at dawn, when the Pleiades wash up in the early evening, when Arcturus leans into spring. It is a tiny atlas of time written in starlight and inscribed in metal. And threaded through the text are astronomical numbers that guided the builders, ratios for cycles, counts of months, checklists that suggest a rigorous design process. The more we read, the louder the past speaks. Debates arc like lightning over one question: did it show the planets? Some fragments and inscriptions hint at planetary motions. A few scholars propose gear trains for Venus, Mercury, and beyond, using the complex epicyclic models known in the Hellenistic world. Others urge caution, arguing that metal has drifted, inscriptions are coy, and the evidence is suggestive, not conclusive. What is not in doubt is that the sun and moon ruled the face, eclipses were predicted with elegant accuracy, and the backdials sang the cycles that govern both gods and men. Even if the planets were absent from the final machine, the mathematical thinking to model them was in the air the maker breathed. Draintures briefed, why build such a device? Imagine the uses. In a culture woven together by shared festivals and fierce city-state pride, timing mattered. The Olympiad decided not just athletic glory, but diplomatic rhythms. Sailors watched the stars to know when the seas would spare them. Priests and philosophers read eclipses as signs of favor or warning. To hold the heavens in your hand was to claim a piece of order amid uncertainty. The mechanism takes abstract cycles, the 19, the 223, and renders them tangible. Turn the crank and the future becomes knowable. That is power. That is beauty. And yet the mechanism's story almost died in silence. For decades after its recovery, its fragments were catalogued, yes, but their significance remained blurry, overshadowed by statues whose beauty needs no decoding. It took a particular kind of mind to see beyond the corrosion, modern detectives with X-ray eyes and a taste for riddles. One by one they appeared, engineers, classicists, astronomers, each adding a gear to our understanding. They built replicas out of brass and wood, they tested theories, they argued. Some reconstructed the movements with software, others with files and lathes. A few went further, forging their own bronze, cutting their own teeth by hand, to test just how precise the ancients had to be. The results are mesmerizing. Turn these reconstructions and the dials sweep with a grace that makes the hair rise on your arms. The eclipse pointer lands where the texts say it should. A lunar phase ball spins from dark to light and back again. The past is no longer static, it moves. And here the question deepens. If a device this sophisticated existed, how many were made? Was this unique? A masterpiece produced for a scholar or a king? Or was there a tradition of such devices, with apprentices learning to file teeth under the watch of a master craftsman, building instruments for temples, academies, wealthy patrons? The ship that sank off Antikythera was a cargo vessel loaded with art and luxury goods, likely bound for a Roman market. Was the mechanism on its way to a collector, a statesman, or a scientist chasing the sky? We cannot yet say. It is a single surviving voice from a choir that may have been large or fleeting. There is a melancholy to the mechanism. The bronze is broken, the wood gone. The knowledge that animated it seems to have vanished into the turbulence of history. Wars, fires, sackings. The great library of Alexandria, where ideas could be stored and shared, dimmed and burned. Rome absorbed Greece, and with empire came different priorities. Road building, law, spectacle. The delicate lineage of instrument makers may have snapped, or perhaps the devices simply rusted away, their owners remembered only as curious men who once built a toy that could recreate the sky. The world forgot, the gears went still, the cosmos kept moving, but the mechanism has a second life in us. Its decoding has redrawn the boundaries we place around the ancients. We no longer smugly insist that they lacked precision, or that mechanical sophistication was born only in medieval Europe. We look back across a gulf of time and see an intelligence, bright, familiar, audacious. To design such a machine is to believe that patterns matter. To build it is to transform belief into action. It is the Greek way in miniature, philosophy turned into craft, myth into calculation, wonder harnessed to a wheel. Think of the hands, a scribe bending over tiny letters. a craftsman holding a gear to the light to check its teeth, an astronomer standing under the same moon we know, scribbling ratios into wax. Maybe they argued about model choice, epicycle or eccentric. Maybe they joked about who would get to turn the crank first. In those moments, the machine is not an artifact. It is a conversation. Across time, they are still talking to us, daring us to match their curiosity with our own. Today, in labs and workshops around the world, people accept the challenge. Engineers print parts on sandy machines and discover, to their delight, that the old geometries sing through new plastics. Horologists, watchmakers, bring their sense of touch to ancient tolerances, refining how tight or loose a pivot must be to keep a dial true. Historians return to the texts, teasing out references in obscure authors for hints about similar devices. Astronomers run simulations to see how the mechanism would perform, tracking different planetary theories. Every reconstruction, every debate, is an act of respect for the original mind. And with each pass, we get closer. Not to a single definitive model that may never exist, but to a clearer view of the possibilities the ancient maker saw when he laid the first gear on the bench. Was it Earth's first computer? The term is imperfect, but the idea is sound. It computes. It models. It predicts. It transforms input into meaningful output using a formal architecture of parts. It even contains what amounts to a user manual. So perhaps the better question is, what were they computing for? To bring the sky closer, to make sense of time, to stitch human ritual to celestial certainty so that a city could breathe in rhythm with the heavens. In a culture that gave us geometry and logic and drama, the mechanism is not an anomaly. It is a culmination. Stand before the fragments today, and you can almost hear the sea. The bronze is green and quiet, but the story hums. A diver's gasp, a scholar's gasp, letters emerging from shadow, a newly cut gear slipping into motion for the first time in 2,000 years. The past is not dead. It is dormant, waiting for the right question, waiting for someone to ask, again, what if? The Antikythera Mechanism invites us to reimagine lineage of ingenuity. It reminds us that knowledge can be lost, yes, but also that curiosity is a muscle civilizations keep flexing. The Greeks flexed it with theater, with democracy, with philosophy shouted in the marketplace and polished in the academy. With this device, they flexed it in bronze. Turn the crank and the sun moves. Turn it again and an eclipse ripples forward through time. Turn it, and you feel the mind of an ancient engineer turning with you. So we return to our question. Who built it? A mathematician's apprentice with metal dust under his nails. A philosopher who refused to let the heavens be only story and not structure. A culture that believed the world was accessible to reason. How did it work? With gears that embody ideas? With cycles spun into spirals? With a delicacy that makes mockery of our arrogance about the past? Why did it vanish? Because history is rough on fragile lineages, because chaos intrudes, because everything, even brilliance, is mortal. And yet here we are, resurrecting it, listening, learning. If a corroded lump in a museum drawer could hold a clockwork universe, what might be hiding in our own blind spots today? Which assumptions will the next discovery overturn? The mechanism's greatest gift may not be what it tells us about the past, but what it asks of our future, to keep our minds supple, our questions bold, and our hands ready to turn the crank. Take one last look at those tiny letters, at the spirals, at the little moon half-shadowed. The cosmos is there waiting, and so is the next mystery.